we have a new artist interview here from my studio here in Telluride, Colorado. This is Daniel Kanow with Breakthrough Art, and I am interviewing local mixed media artist Molly Perrault, who I have known for the last decade from the local art community, and she's been quite involved with the community and has an extremely awesome, unique style of art that anyone who's interested should pay major attention to. So please welcome Molly. Thank you for being here, and thank you for your interest in getting an interview today.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel, and thanks for such a kind introduction. I'm excited to talk to you today.
Fantastic. Molly, tell us about yourself. Where did you come from to get to Telluride that brought you here, that brought your art here? What kind of background can you give us?
Totally. I moved out here, like you said, about 10 years ago from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. That's where I grew up. I went to school. I went to LSU there. I studied actually I studied digital art at LSU. I also minored in painting and drawing and art history. And afterwards, I was kind of just sick of the flatness of Louisiana, and it kind of became a love story. I moved out to Colorado to follow my now husband. But more so, I'm just extremely inspired and motivated by being in the mountains. I find them just an inspiring landscape, and they've definitely kind of informed my art. I wouldn't have really considered myself a landscape artist until I moved out here, and now definitely the majority of my pieces are kind of landscape based and inspired by these beautiful places that surround us and kind of the feeling of being here in it in the mountains. So that's pretty much my story. And yeah, I work here. I also work at the Telluride Historical Museum, and make art.
Fantastic. Well, welcome. I'm glad you're here. You've definitely inspired me with your artwork. Your approach is so different than anything I've ever done, and the patience and the resilience that you put into your artwork, I think is so beautiful. So tell us about what you do that makes you so different, because we're calling you a mixed media artist. I'm more so of a painter, and you work in a way that is unique to yourself. And I'm curious if this is something that you developed on your own. Did you get inspired by any artists in school or living in Louisiana? What brought you to become a mixed media artist?
Sure. So most of my pieces are created with magazine paper. I've got stacks and stacks of magazines just around me at all times. And essentially, these are my palettes. I'll go through any magazine and look for colors that I need. And then, say I'm working on a sky, I'll go look for those specific colors of blues and then create a palette that looks something like this.
Oh, cool.
And then just kind of cut them out. I'll put them on the canvas. So it's a very similar process to painting, but instead of using paint, I'm using these little scraps of paper that I find in magazines. And people ask me all the time how I kind of got started doing this. I think I saw someone working in a similar fashion, like as a teenager. I'm definitely inspired by other artists, and I visit galleries and museums all the time. I know I didn't completely make this up. People want to, give me credit for making up a new medium, and I'm like, I didn't make this up at all. There's plenty of people that kind of work similar ways. But it was definitely convenient when I moved all the way out here to Telluride. I basically just had the contents of what I could fit in my little Honda Fit. And pretty much everywhere I've lived in Telluride has been pretty small. Me and my
Mhm.
husband live in a little 1-bedroom apartment. So I using something like oil paints just isn't logistically, it doesn't logistically make sense in these small spaces that I work in. So this actually works really well for, small spaces and finding materials as I go. I don't have to go, worry about my paints drying out here, especially with how dry Telluride is. I don't have to worry about, running out of materials. I can go to our wonderful free box and find magazines and books to cut up. In fact, we have a lovely community of people here in Telluride who save me magazines and bring them to me all the time, which is such a sweet love language.
What is it
Um,
that you're looking for when you're like finding magazines at the free box, or someone's bringing you like what kind of magazine are you drawn to that has graphics and colors and imagery that you want to utilize and then kind of take apart in order to find your unique use of it?
Sometimes it depends on the project. Typically, for my paper paintings, as I like to call them, I'm looking for thicker paper, but not too thick. I'm looking for kind of vibrant colors. There's like kind of the glossy element. I don't like it being too glossy, like the tabloids don't totally work. The magazines that work really well, I love art magazines because they already have beautiful kind of painterly textures and colors and palettes that I'm already going for. So like the plein air magazines are fantastic when I can get my hands on those. I'll have some like interior design magazines that work out pretty well. They're usually pretty intentionally laid out and have nice colors and textures and things. Um, so I am kind of a magazine snob at this point, and people will be like, I have a stack of National Geographics, and as great as National Geographic is as a publication, their paper's way too flimsy. They don't have enough colors, so I'm a little picky.
So tell us that. So like, tell us more. Like you've got this palette of containers of different colors of torn paper that kind of do the whole color spectrum for you, and you have an idea in mind. So how are you going about your creative process, utilizing the materials? How are you applying them, and how do you come up with the concept of the layering, the building of the texture, the building of the concept, starting from little pieces to create something that in the end is extremely detailed and has high contrast and value and generally tells a really beautiful story? I'm just curious about what's that like. It's different than a painter who has it laid out with here's all my different paints and my colors, or someone drawing and they have their charcoal and they have their pens and they're doing sketches. Like, what is your modality of how you're using your palette, then how you're taking that into fruition to actually start, and the process of going through?
Sure. I would actually say, like, for most of my life, basically until I moved to Telluride, I've always been a painter. I've worked in acrylics and oils, and I think my process and my technique with paper is still pretty similar to how I worked with paint. The main thing is I usually work kind of background to foreground since I am kind of building in layers and layers and more layers. So I'll usually, if I'm doing a landscape, I'll start with the sky and try to get the colors just right, and then, kind of work from the horizon forward, just because I know I'm going to be covering things up and I want the layers to feel organic and correct, if that makes sense.
Right.
Um,
So you are doing the process as a painter where you would do multiple layers and build that narrative history of stroke after stroke after stroke to finally get that push and pull between. You're able to do with little pieces that you're adhering, gluing, paint. I'm not sure how you're doing it all together, but like, is it seem like almost faster, more intuitive than if it was paint? Or does it slow you down because you need kind of a drying time? Like people talk about the acrylics, the difference between acrylics and oils and the dry time or the speed, open time. Like, how is that working with a palette of small pieces of ripped paper or cut paper?
it dries almost immediately, especially up here with how dry it is. It's definitely slower than painting just because the pieces are so tiny. So it is definitely like I would say this is the one area of my life that I'm a patient person. Other than that, if you ask me if I'm patient, I'd be like, no, I'm not patient. So it's almost like a lesson in like slowing down and meditating and taking it piece by piece by piece and just allowing myself to, do something slowly and meticulously and trusting that trusting the process and knowing that I'll be pleased with the outcome. I've done this enough times to where I'm like, trust the process. Like
Right.
I'm just a little bit at a time. If I finish a piece and it takes me 3 months, that's fine.
So you're pretty outcome independent as you're working. You have an idea, but the process, the building, and the letting it sit and going to different sections and building that relationship within the work is a manner like you said, it could take 3 months or it can be quicker, but it sounds like that's not as important to you as it is to just kind of be in that meditational moment where you're having to be fully conscious of the present moment. You have to, like, knowing you can't jump from A to Z as quick as you'd like. If you were painting, or in acrylics, for example, you might be able to whip it out real fast versus, like, the length of time for your process. that patience is a really great attribute, great characteristic to take into life that you have to then take into your work.
Absolutely. That's definitely correct. And I'm usually working from like reference photos of pictures that I've taken, around Telluride, around the mountains, places I've been, and like I said, have kind of stuck with me and inspired me in different ways. So I know, generally what the final piece is going to look like since I'm working from a reference photo.
Sure,
But
give us an example, like an example of a
yeah,
reference photo that you would then utilize to then create a piece.
yeah, so I printed out so I can look at it as I work. This was kind of an alley scene in Telluride from the summer, and I loved this one because the cloud looked like a little thought bubble.
Yeah,
So I was like, oh, it's like the mountains having a thought. So I was like, maybe even once I'm done, I'll put something like text in the bubble. But
that's
I've been
awesome.
stuck on if I were Ajax the mountain, what would I be thinking? So I haven't decided on that quite yet, but this is the piece in progress. Obviously, I haven't gotten to the foreground, the buildings quite yet, but like I said, I kind of started with the sky, the cloud, then I put in the mountains, and then the mountains that are closer, then the road, and then my next move is slowly working on the buildings, which I've started. This one's pretty small, so it's kind of hard to see those tiny details, but
So
again, it doesn't
is
look
this
like much
on
right now.
canvas? Are you on canvas or a
Yes,
board?
yes, this is just an oval shaped canvas I found somewhere. And I don't remember exactly when did I started this piece like in August. It's one I've kind of been kind of going back to when I needed a break from other things I'm working on. Um,
And then a piece like that you have in your hand, are you sketching the whole thing out beforehand, or do you work intuitively and kind of let it grow? If I guess maybe that's more an abstraction, but what is your process kind of when you consider that from start to finish?
Sure. For these landscapes, I usually sketch it out beforehand and then just kind of fill it in section by section, which I know in school they tell you to kind of work the whole piece at a time.
Hmm.
And I just don't know how I could really do that with this type of process. I am trying to do more abstraction, expressive types of pieces that utilize this mixed media process that I've been working on, and those I am kind of working the entire piece at a time. But for these, it's definitely a little bit more slow and methodical and just detail oriented, which is nice because I can kind of pick it apart like color by color. I'm like, this side of the mountain is purple, whereas this side has more of a blue, and this side's more of a dark green. Like I can really just like pick it apart piece by piece and really just like dig in and think about the colors and think about the textures like one little section at a time, which is really does actually translate into real life. As I'm walking around, I'll really focus more on colors and textures and really just think about, if I were collaging this aspen tree, what color would I look for, that kind of thing.
So that's really exciting. So that kind of like your external world is combined with your internal world of creating your art, where you're seeing color. You're a colorist, and color and texture is so important to your work. And even a piece like that, the development is so beautiful and so complex and so refined. Once you get that whole palette covered, do you then go back? All your white space is gone. Do you go back and further refine as it's now been covered and now you're kind of working more on relationship or size? It seems like the size of your cutout pieces are really important because
Hmm.
one color can be so expressive, like just an extra thin piece here or a block of color over here. Does that happen sometimes where you get the whole thing covered and then you're like, okay, cool, now I need to really create those modifications so that everything's speaking to each other?
Oh, absolutely. And I think about the Impressionists a lot. I think I had a teacher in college who said that they had to have a little bit of red in every painting. I don't know if I believe that, but like I think about that all the time, just having like, these little pops of color that really make you notice something in a different way, or, bring a certain section to life in a way that like even a photograph couldn't capture. Like I'm not trying to create a photograph, I'm trying to create kind of like a feeling, I guess, an experience. Maybe that sounds cheesy, but
Oh,
you
tell
know,
me more about that. Tell me more about that feeling or experience when you're coming from a photograph. You may have taken the photograph or using someone else's photograph, and now you're turning into something personal that's got your own personal authenticity and power. What is the story that you're bringing through expression, through color, through emotion?
definitely the stories. I think about movement a lot. If you look at Vincent van Gogh's pieces, for instance, they just have this like energy and this movement to them. It feels like there's like a rhythm and
Yeah.
a life inside this frame. And I've worked. I guess that's my ultimate goal is to kind of capture that movement and pretty much everything I do. I want there to be a sense of like there's nothing still at all. Even like, the rocks and the mountains and things that we think of as still are, you know, a living, breathing part of the landscape, if that makes sense. And
Yeah.
I really want my pieces to kind of capture how everything around us is alive. And, when we're walking through a mountain, for instance, we're part of that. We're part of nature. We're not just, I've always loved the Grateful Dead quote, the "We are the eyes of the world," and that's like the main thing I think of when I'm making art is like, I'm the universe experiencing itself. I'm the,
Oh, cool. I love
yeah, yeah.
So by that, we are the eyes of the world. Like you are in you and your painting are kind of merging. You're allowing your own personal life experience to come through your artwork and vice versa.
Definitely, definitely. I mean, especially when they take so long, I feel like, I'm moving through life. I'm going through different moods and emotions, ups and downs of just things happening outside the canvas, and
Right.
whether I like it or not, like I do think that they translate themselves, over time into the way that I, cut out these little pieces of paper and glue them to the canvas. Like you said, sometimes the size of the little shards of paper change, sometimes the shapes change, and it's
Hmm.
totally unintentional, but like I am aware of the fact that like, whatever I'm feeling somehow gets translated one way or another into the piece I'm working on. I mean, I'm sure you deal with the same thing. I'm sure that's a universal experience that most artists
Yeah, yeah.
can
I think it
relate
is
to.
a universal experience that some people are more aware of than others. When we have commercial art and we have fine art and we have expressive art or narrative art, there's so many variations, and now we have AI art where you can just speak your idea into your phone. I guess I'm interested in your perspective on that. Before I get to that, though, I'm just curious, kind of going back to like you were talking about how little pieces you can cut up here and there. Are there times like you have a piece that's coming together, something happened in your day, you're experiencing something in life, you're having some, I don't know, something's charged or you're very sublime, and you're like, actually, that needs a sliver of this more, or the shape that I can add to this is going to add more to that rhythm that's going to kind of capture the essence that I'm looking for. And you go and you just make that change. And, maybe it changes it from someone else's perspective, but for you, it feels more complete.
Oh, definitely, and I mean, that's probably a benefit of having my studio just, like, in the corner of my living room. You can't see the rest of the space, the couch and the TV and the windows. So I'll be sitting here at the couch watching TV and glance over, and I'm like,
Hmm.
"That really needs more purple," you
Yeah,
know? And
that's
maybe it's
awesome.
because I'm watching something on the TV and, my eyes are focused on the purples and whatever movie
Yeah,
it is, and I'm just thinking about the color purple and, the experience of or the mood it creates. And I'm like, you know what? The way they're using that would work well, in the shadows of that mountain. So it,
beautiful.
it definitely is kind of a conversation in between, what I'm working on and everything else in life.
Fantastic, fantastic. Now let's change the direction into abstraction. You've got this big abstract piece behind you. You've shown us a landscape of the Telluride Valley, and that's more of what I've seen as has been your landscapes that are very highly detailed. What is it like for you to go into non-representational? Do you like that freedom, or do you like more of the constraint of knowing the physicality of what's being created by experiencing it? One, because you walk outside, you experience it because you live here, and two, it's something that has a structure to it. How is that different for you in your creative process?
It's totally like a yin and a yang. The landscapes, you know, like I said, are kind of meditative, whereas I see the act of making something more abstract, like a sense of play. Like I think it's a lot of fun to try to be just as expressive and weird as possible and see what happens. I started this, I don't know, back in January or something. And it's the type of piece that every now and then I'll just throw something on. I'm like, oh, it needs a little something here. I've gotten very mixed reactions on that piece. I've had some people who love it, and some people are like, keep working on it. And I think that's what's wonderful about an abstract piece is
Yeah.
it's never truly finished. I don't know if I'll ever reach a point where I'm like, yes, it's done. It's completely done. But I'm sure there'll be a point when I'm like, it's good enough. Time for the next thing. But I love how like kind of like conversational and subjective, I guess, abstraction can be. And I see it as definitely almost more of a challenge than, you know, just a landscape where you get to a point and you're like, yep, it looks good. It's pretty. It'll hang on someone's wall. Whereas like abstraction to me is just so much deeper and more expressive. And I think can say so much more about like, I don't know, the human experience, if you will. So it's definitely, you know, an area that I want to explore more. And I think it's a lot of fun to play around with and see, just kind of see what happens. So this piece here, I can grab it down.
Yeah, I'd love to
Um,
see a close up of it. I think that'd be great.
this is inspired by explosions.
Wow.
So I'm trying to just make a giant explosion with this piece. I don't know if you can see the whole thing.
Yeah.
And really, like, I just see so many cool things in magazines that don't really fit into any of my other pieces, and I'm just like, what if I just threw them all together on a piece? And this is me at my absolute weirdest. There's actually, wait, what
Well,
was it? Oh, the name.
what is it that's weird for you?
It's just it's just weird. I don't know. There's like weird little elements. The name of it's Frog. I start somebody threw away like an old frog dissection like science textbook, and that's one of the things I started with. You can still see a few of those pieces. I don't know how well this is
Oh yeah, I see
translating
the
in
frog right
the
there. Yep.
yeah, and it still says frog right there, so I thought perfect. That's the title. Um, and I've got some dolphin imagery, some butterfly imagery. I've got some little skiers. Um,
So it's like it's a narrative story in a non-objective abstraction where there are concrete elements mixed in. It's almost like a Finding Waldo. You want to go deep in it and you want to study every
yeah,
single section because there's a story to be learned.
yeah. Sorry, this piece is so unwieldy. Sorry, trying to figure out where I can sit and talk about it. But you are absolutely right, and I guess that's kind of my intention. Is I want it to be kind of like an experience. Like the longer you look at it, the more things you notice. Maybe different people will focus on different aspects of it, but also like out of just glance, I want the feeling of it to just be like, you know, chaos, the Big Bang, you know, this explosion. Kind of this like outward momentum. You start kind of in the middle and go outward, and things are kind of expanding and moving, and you know, getting finding their own path.
Hmm.
So this is maybe the first piece of a series that has yet to come about. Um, but it's definitely kind of something that sits on the wall and kind of begs my attention from time to time. And yeah, it gives me something to think about and ponder. And some days I love it, some days I hate it. And for that, it's maybe one of my favorite pieces.
Yeah, I mean, that's life right there, right? We have the things we love
Yeah,
and hate all in the same thing, and you have to go back and forth to it, and it draws you in and pushes you away. I mean, I think to me, that's like that has such an essence of powerful artwork. That's it's great to make pretty stuff that's easy to sell, but to make
sure.
something that's actually repelling you and bringing you in based on your day, like you're interacting with the work for you and you're growing with it and modifying and you're letting it sit. There's not a rush, and you're already, future pacing at it out. If this is going to be a series 5 years from now, I might have a half a dozen of these, but right now I'm still working on it, and it's 10 months old, and it's still breathing. And that's like that. I mean,
Absolutely.
that's a beautiful process for sure. Thank you for sharing that. That's really
Oh,
cool.
thank you. Yeah, and like I said, some people hate it, so I appreciate your positivity about it. We'll see what comes about there, but I definitely love exploring a little bit more non-subjective
Yeah,
areas with my art.
I'm curious how your work's going to develop as you continue the yin yang, as you're kind of mixing the abstract. You're doing pure abstraction that has some narrative, and then you're doing landscapes. If there'll be a merger at times where some of your abstractions have more concrete aspects, and some of your landscapes have some more kind of organic fluidity that is coming from just from your own mind, and you're just building intuitively. However it goes, I mean, it's really cool. I do the same. I go between, abstraction and landscape and pencil drawing and charcoal. And people always say, focus on one thing. I'm like, well, I am focusing on
Oh,
one thing, but it's like one thing at a time, and then I'll come back and
yeah.
circle back to how long have you been working on this painting? Well, I've been working on that painting on and off for 8 years, you know? And that's a question. Do you think artwork's ever done? Is it ever completely finished? Or would you go back into an older piece 30 years later and be like, structurally, I can add this, emotionally, I want to change that. Would that be something you would do?
I'm definitely someone who goes back and tweaks with things. I think there is a certain point, I don't know, maybe 10 years or so where, let sleeping dogs lie. I have like a piece. I guess it's more like nostalgia, but like the first ever paper painting I made is actually of Trout Lake, and I made
Wonderful.
that when I was still in college. And there have been times that where I'm like,
Show more of it.
ah,
Talk about that piece a little bit, because it's a finished landscape.
yeah, and this was it's definitely a little bit looser and more impressionistic than my landscapes today. Unfortunately, I don't have many of them with me besides the one I just showed you. But here's one. So this is more what they look like today. This one's at least 5 or 6 years old. But you can see it's a little bit more detailed, a little bit tighter. The
It is and
pieces
it's
that are
not. I mean, from a distance, because I haven't seen that painting, the square one or rectangular one. It is very painterly. Like, it looks like an oil painting. It has that impressionistic feel to it. It has that textured feel, and I could see the detail, but also from a distance, that's a very, very beautiful piece, and it's so different too
thank
when
you,
something's circular or something has a rectangular format. But yeah, I love all the white in
thank
there. It's
you,
juicy.
thank you. Um, but yeah, sorry, I lost my train of thought there. Yeah, I guess it's an evolving process. Like this piece, which is the first one I ever worked on, I probably wouldn't go back and fix. The piece I just showed you, probably not, but, like, there's some pieces, like, let's say I made them within the last, like, 3 years, I think it's
Mhm.
fair game that I'll see something and be like my main I guess the main thing that I use to, like, be like, "Alright, it's done," is I'll bring it over to the gallery and be like, "Take this from me."
There you go.
Put it somewhere, I need to call this done for my own sanity. So, it's
Fantastic.
yeah.
Very good. Tell me more about your thoughts on current state of art, from AI to political, social reality of the world. Like, where do you see art fitting in, human-made art versus technologically made art, or art for a statement or a purpose, or art for purely classic expression? What is your take on the current state, and where you think art is going holistically, or primarily for you, however you want to play that?
Oh, it's a big question. I firmly believe that AI art is not art. I think only humans can make art. I think art is a human. Art is an expression of being human.
Mhm.
So even if you don't call yourself an artist and you make a painting, that's art. I think if a robot makes art, they're making an image. I think it requires a human creativity, a human mind, a human perspective to make art. um, so I definitely think that AI and technology can inform the art process. I think, if you're looking for a reference image that doesn't exist, using AI is fair game for that. I mean, like I said, I've studied digital art, and I think that there's a lot of good that can come from like creating art in computers and animating and creating paintings and digital spaces and that kind of thing. Um, but as far as like robots making art, I'm like, I think that's a, you know, something that we're going to quickly be like, that's not art. No one wants to go to a museum and see things that were just made by machines. I think, um, the first time I visit a new place, the first thing I notice is, it's art and the the culture that surrounds that. I love seeing like street art that people have posted all over the place. I love, visiting museums in foreign cities and kind of seeing how that speaks for itself and the place and the people who live there. It's definitely, still a powerful means of kind of coming to understand each other. And I think now more than ever, we need to understand each other, and maybe art is a great method to do that, especially when words fail us, and words do fail us quite often. I think
Yeah.
kind of coming to a mutual understanding through the beauty in this world and kind of creating, beautiful moments and beautiful ideas that we can kind of connect with instead. So I still think that art should always, hold a very powerful place in, our communities and all of that.
Yeah, it makes me happy when I ask that question and people still drill down on the medium of art being a necessary tool of communication for us to bond as a human community, and that it's such like a, despite our language barriers, art is such a way to understand each other, to see that street art or art in a museum, or for people who are in super challenging life situations, traumatic situations, or in a war zone, that like that those little elements of creativity sometimes can be that blessing, that opportunity to like reconnect with something larger than themselves. And to me, that's, yeah, I think it's super important, and I'm glad it is for you as well. Molly,
Definitely.
what do you see as your next steps are? What's coming up for you as your kind of goals and aspirations, like near term, long term?
Sure. I mean, I'm pretty happy with the way things are. I'm currently working on a pet portrait, which, artistically, it's not, bringing my art to new levels, but I love how fulfilling it is for the client that I'm making it for. So that always feels good to finish it and deliver it to the person who it'll provide a lot of meaning to in their lives and in their homes. So I might do a few little commissions. I try not to do too many commissions just because it can get kind of like, making art for, I think it's important to make art for myself as well as other people. So
Mhm.
there's a good balance there to maintain. And on that level, like, these weird pieces that we just talked about, I feel like the winter is a great time to work on that. I spend a lot of time kind of like inside, and, it's kind of a darker, headier time of the year. So I think it's a great time to kind of dive deeper and challenge myself and try to take myself outside of my comfort zone and do some weird stuff. So I always want my art to be weirder. So a lot of times that's like my biggest critique of myself is like, I'm not being weird enough. My art needs to be
More
stranger.
weird art on the horizon. How can
Yeah.
your work get more weird? What needs to happen for more weirdness?
Oh, the main thing is like varying my materials. Like I said, I use magazine paper from kind of, these like design publications and art magazines and that kind of thing. But like, if you go out into the world, there's just so many just like weird scraps that you find, like either in the free box or littered in the street that people are getting rid of, the library is getting rid of. So just kind of like being inspired by things that you find, is a lot of fun. It kind of creates it turns life into a treasure hunt. Like, what can I find? What can I glue to a panel or a canvas that I can eventually turn into art? And it kind of takes the play outside of the canvas and into the world, and I think that's a lot of fun.
Very cool. So more weird art.
Yeah.
Any more landscape work? Or are you going to spend the winter kind of going into some finishing some commissions and then into some more abstraction?
It's a balance. I mean, I'll probably finish this little piece I'm working on.
Mhm.
I've been thinking about doing like some winter scenes or like, I don't know, a nocturne or something. It really just kind of depends on my mood.
Nice.
I jump around a lot, just kind of depending on, I haven't done this in a while and I think that would be fun. Or, you know,
Yeah, freshen it up.
yeah, keep it fresh, gotta keep myself engaged and interested. I try to make art every day, so I have to give myself something to wanna keep coming back.
That's wonderful, wonderful. How can people see more of your art, like online, in person, a kind of experience, Molly Perrault's artwork that's, has this kind of technique that not too many people are used to. Up close, you could tell it's a mixed media paper painting. From afar, it could be this like luscious oil painting. Like where can people experience that and see it in person, get to see it up close, get to take it home if they want?
So I try to post most of my pieces, at least all the pieces that I like, to Instagram, and that's molly.perro.art. And then if you want to see them in person, I've got them at Fringe Gallery here in Telluride. And if they're not on display, you can ask whoever's there to pull them out. And other than that, I don't know. Stay tuned. We'll see.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Fringe Gallery, Telluride, Colorado, and we'll post your handle for your Instagram account, and
Thanks.
and then I'll get that from you again, and we'll post that and in the link with this YouTube video. Anything else you'd like to share about your work, your process, your vision, your philosophy as an artist before we close out?
Oh man, I feel like I just shared everything I could think of. But yeah, if you have any questions, I'm
No,
here. Yeah.
I'd love to visit with you in your studio. I'd love to catch up for some coffee and see some work, firsthand. And thanks so much for, taking the time to talk and to kind of explore your creative process and to really dive deep into your own story and your own meaning. Because yeah, I love your work. I'm glad we got to reconnect here, Molly.
Oh, thank you so much, Daniel. This has been a lot of fun. I really appreciate your questions and taking the time.
You got it. You got it. Well, hold on. I'm going to end the recording. So again, this is Daniel Kanow with Breakthrough Art. We've been interviewing local mixed media artist Molly Perrault, does these beautiful paper paintings that she calls, and you can experience those here live in Telluride at her gallery at Fringe Gallery and online on Instagram. You can follow her and let us know if any questions. Awesome. Thanks, everybody.